Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleepy Explorer. I'm glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you're lying under the gentle weight of blankets, or maybe you're listening with a faint hum of a fan in the corner, or perhaps with the soft quiet of your room all around you. Wherever you are, you're part of this little community that's curious about the universe, but prefers to wander through its mysteries at a slower, softer pace. Tonight, we're going to tiptoe into one of the strangest what-ifs you could imagine. What would happen if gravity stopped working? Now, before we go too far, here's a reality check. If gravity actually cut out, you wouldn't make it past the first second. Your coffee would float away, your lungs would feel like balloons, and let's be honest, you'd probably lose track of your socks pretty quickly. Not the most dignified way to exit the universe. So, before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly find these quiet journeys relaxing and meaningful. And while you're here, I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your corner of the world right now? I always love seeing how far these late-night explorations reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's drift into tonight's story together. The first instant after gravity stops is almost imperceptible. You don't suddenly shoot into the ceiling or fly out of your chair. Instead, there's a silence you feel more than hear, like a string in the fabric of the world has been cut. The pressure that holds you comfortably to your bed or couch is gone, and you realize just how much you've relied on that invisible pull every second of your life. You start to rise, gently, like a feather disturbed by the smallest breeze. Your coffee cup, if you had one on the table nearby, doesn't clink or spill, it simply lifts, as if the air itself is tired of playing the role of atmosphere and decides it wants to let go. The liquid doesn't pour, it forms into tiny shimmering spheres, each droplet a miniature planet without an orbit. The room becomes a snow globe of little drifting things: pens, a remote control, a pillow, the crumbs you swore you cleaned last week. They all join in the quiet rebellion against Earth. And then it hits you. It's not just the things around you. The very air is moving. Normally, gravity keeps oxygen close, tugging every molecule down, blanketing the Earth in breathable comfort. Without that anchor, the atmosphere begins to expand, rushing outward like an open soda fizzing into space. The pressure in your lungs changes, and you realize the breath you just took may be one of your last. Scientists still argue whether gravity is truly a force at all, or just the way space-time bends under the weight of mass. But whatever name you give it, without gravity, nothing is tethered anymore. Not the air, not the oceans, not you. Now, let's float a little further into this picture. You glance at your pet, maybe a cat perched lazily on the arm of the couch. Normally dignified, she's now flailing gently in mid-air, tail puffed with confusion. Somewhere in the house, a drawer slides open on its own, not because it was pulled, but because nothing is pulling it closed anymore. The very balance of tension and rest that defined every object's place has dissolved. And here comes a slightly quirky thought. If you'd been brushing your teeth when this happened, you'd now be surrounded by a halo of toothpaste foam. Little white bubbles suspended like stars around your bewildered reflection. A cosmic, minty nebula in your bathroom. Zooming out, your neighborhood begins to unravel. Cars lose their weight and drift on half-flat tires. Street lamps hover slightly, their posts still rooted but not pressing down. Water in the gutters beads up, forming perfect silver spheres that float upward instead of flowing down the drain. Somewhere, a river leaps into the sky, its current dissolving into an expanding cloud of droplets that twinkle in the sunlight before fading into space. The Earth, too, is trembling. You don't feel it in your body, but far beneath your drifting feet, tectonic plates are no longer clamped together by the planet's pull. The crust wants to fracture, like pieces of a puzzle whose frame has been taken away. Oceans surge not outward in waves, but upward into space, great globes of water peeling off Earth's surface like tears in zero gravity. Gravity, you realize, isn't just an invisible hand keeping your coffee on the table. It's the reason air clings to the ground, why oceans don't boil into the void, why your body has pressure at all. And with its disappearance, the world is beginning to unravel, not in hours or days, but in seconds. Still, the human mind reaches for metaphors. You can't help but think of the Earth as a basket woven by invisible threads. Cut those threads, and the weave begins to loosen. One by one, atoms and molecules slip free, unbound, joining a slow, silent exodus into space. Now, here's a fact to anchor yourself with. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station experience microgravity because they're in free fall around Earth. They're not free from gravity, far from it. They're constantly being pulled, but they miss the ground every time. If gravity truly vanished, even that tether would be gone. The ISS wouldn't orbit, it would drift off in a straight line forever, carrying its bewildered crew into the dark. And yet, there's still debate among physicists. Does gravity propagate like a force carried by a particle, the hypothetical graviton? Or is it simply the geometry of space-time, with no off switch to flip at all? Scientists still argue whether the very thought experiment we're indulging in is possible even in principle. For tonight, though, let's pretend it is, and follow the consequences. Within minutes, Earth's atmosphere is thinning, not gradually but explosively. The sky darkens as blue leaks away, turning black not at nightfall but in midday. Stars appear above you even as the sun still burns, a reminder that without air to scatter light, the sky doesn't know how to be blue anymore. The funny part, if you can call it that, is that your socks really do drift off. You always wondered where they went after laundry day, turns out. In a no-gravity world, they just float away, no dryer monster required. And so you float, along with cats, coffee, cars and clouds, into a sky that is no longer a sky, but a path out into space. A hush settles over everything, the kind of silence that feels like the pause between heartbeats. Without weight, without anchor, without the invisible tug that's been with you since birth, the universe feels both terrifying and strangely peaceful. And this, dear friend, is only the first few minutes. Gravity has stopped working, and the unraveling has just begun. The moment you've drifted free of your couch, with your socks floating like tiny satellites and your cat tumbling indignantly beside you, the true enormity of what's happening begins to reveal itself. Gravity hasn't just left your house, it has abandoned Earth itself. At first glance, it feels like freedom. No weight, no effort, no aching feet at the end of the day. You can drift toward the ceiling with a push of your fingertips. For a second, you even laugh. It feels like being an astronaut, without all the training, bulky suits, and unfortunate freeze-dried meals. But then your smile fades, because the air feels thinner, not in the way you notice on a hike up a mountain, but in a way that makes your lungs work harder, each inhale less satisfying than the last. Gravity was the invisible hand holding the atmosphere close, pressing nitrogen and oxygen around you like a protective blanket. Now, that blanket is slipping away. The very breath you depend on is fleeing into the dark. Look out the window. The trees aren't standing anymore, they're floating. Roots tear through the soil as if Earth itself has decided to shrug them off. Cars drift, tipping awkwardly as they scrape against houses, lampposts, or each other, before losing contact with the ground completely. The soundscape is eerie. Metal groans, wood splinters, glass cracks, but then silence follows as nothing lands, nothing hits, nothing crashes down. Everything just floats. And the oceans, dear friend, oh, the oceans, they're no longer content to hug the shorelines, restrained by tides and basins. Great bulges of water peel away from the surface, globes the size of mountains rising gently, breaking free like soap bubbles from a dish. Rivers unravel into mist, raindrops in reverse. Lakes balloon upward, chasing the atmosphere itself into the void. Here's your mainstream fact for the night. Earth's atmosphere is bound by gravity. Without it, oxygen would escape within minutes, and within days the planet would be stripped bare, looking less like the blue marble you know, and more like the barren face of the moon. Now for the quirky tidbit. Insects, flies, bees, mosquitoes, they've suddenly become better adapted than you. With their tiny bodies and wings, they can at least flap and maneuver in the chaos. For a short while, they'll buzz like masters of a new zero-gravity circus, while you and your cat are reduced to clumsy, flailing amateurs. Still, scientists argue whether even a thought experiment like this is meaningful. Could gravity really stop, or would it ripple out at the speed of light, leaving Earth unaware for 8 minutes until the sun's pull failed too? If so, you'd have just under 500 seconds before the entire solar system came undone. Not much comfort, but hey, that's almost enough time to finish your coffee if it weren't already floating away in pearly spheres. Step outside, or rather, push yourself through the door frame. Your house is drifting too, slowly peeling away from the earth like a leaf in a breeze. Neighborhoods rise in formation, buildings shedding bricks and shingles that scatter into the air like confetti. Dogs bark, but the sound is thinner, fainter without air pressure. Sound itself is beginning to fade. Now, tilt your head upward. The sky is no longer a sky. It is a window. The familiar blue has vanished, replaced with the black of space, spangled with stars that were once hidden. They burn cold and clear, watching silently as the earth begins to dissolve into its own atmosphere. But let's stretch your imagination even further. Think about your own body. Gravity has always tugged blood downward, pooling in your feet, requiring your heart to work against it. Without that tug, blood rushes upward into your head. Astronauts often describe the sensation as feeling constantly congested, like a never-ending head cold. Your cheeks puff, your eyes feel swollen, and your nose seems perpetually stuffed. Right now, you're experiencing it too, the woozy, floaty flush of a human body trying to adapt to a world that has lost its anchor. Remember your kitchen downstairs? The fridge has opened itself, contents floating in gentle spirals. Milk drifts beside eggs. Slices of bread separate into a lazy carousel, jars bob like buoys in a phantom tide. Somewhere in there, a pickle jar lid pops loose, green slices fanning out into a drifting galaxy of vinegar and spice. And yet, amid the absurdity, there's terror creeping in. Gravity didn't just keep your socks in the drawer, it kept your bones strong. Without its constant tug, muscles weaken, bones thin, hearts shrink. Astronauts endure this in months-long space flights, despite constant exercise. Without gravity forever? Humanity, as you know it, could not last. But for now, you just drift. Your cat paws at nothing, eyes wide, tail thrashing. You realize she doesn't understand, but then, do you? Could anyone? The planet itself is disassembling. Earth isn't a solid rock, but a molten core wrapped in fragile layers. Without gravity's pressure, that molten core boils outward. Lava fountains into space, glowing rivers breaking free like ribbons of fire. The world doesn't explode, it unravels. Piece by piece, a planet undone. And through it all, you float quietly, listening to the silence deepen. A cosmic invitation, perhaps, to witness the unraveling of a world without anchor. As you float above what used to be your street, watching houses pirouette like clumsy dancers in slow motion, a new thought slips into your drifting mind. If Earth has lost its grip, what about the sun? You tilt your head or maybe your entire body, because in zero gravity orientation doesn't matter, and you realize with a quiet chill, without gravity, the sun no longer holds Earth in orbit. The planet is no longer tracing its neat ellipse, no longer circling like a loyal companion. Instead, it's moving in a straight line, racing into the void with you still hanging on for the ride. Here's your mainstream fact of the evening. Newton told us long ago that planets orbit because they're falling around the sun, constantly tugged by gravity. Take away that pull, and Earth simply drifts off in a straight path, like a marble released from a sling. Quirky tidbit? Well, congratulations. You're technically on the fastest, wildest road trip in human history. The Earth is now barreling through the galaxy at roughly 30 kilometers per second, 90 times faster than a bullet. That's right, you, your socks, your house, and your terrified cat are all passengers on a runaway world, unmoored, slicing through starlight with no destination. Scientists still argue how long life could even cling to a drifting Earth. Without the sun's heat, the temperature would plummet. Within a week, the average surface temperature would fall below freezing. In a year, the oceans would be locked under ice, and yet, curiously, geothermal vents in the deep sea might still cradle life, tiny pockets of warmth beneath a frozen shell. But for you, up here, there's no waiting for ice. The sky is black now, the sun no longer warming your cheeks, no longer blazing as the central hearth of human history. In fact, the sun itself is unraveling. Without gravity, its plasma usually held in a tight glowing ball is expanding, bleeding outward in a silent firestorm. The star that once gave you life is dissolving into space, more like a candle flame snuffed than a blazing eternal torch. Picture it, the sun's layers peeling away, hydrogen and helium billowing outward into a vast cloud of cosmic ash. It doesn't explode like in dramatic movies. It sighs. Its light dims. Within days, it's a memory, a cooling ghost of radiance spreading across the solar system. And the planets? They've lost their master. Jupiter drifts one way, Saturn another, Mars wandering like a lonely ember through the dark. The solar system isn't a family anymore, it's a scattering, siblings flung apart in silence. Now, here's a fun little aside for your imagination. Without the sun's gravity, even comets have lost their sense of direction. Somewhere in the Oort cloud, icy wanderers are shrugging, changing paths, deciding at random whether to plunge inward or outward. The elegant dance of celestial mechanics has become a clumsy shuffle, and the universe doesn't seem to care. Back on Earth, your poor, unraveling planet things are worse. The oceans are already halfway gone, droplets frozen into glittering crystals tumbling into space. Clouds drift upward, unraveling into nothing. Crops wilt as sunlight fades. The very rhythm of night and day is gone. Instead, you're in eternal twilight, the faint glow of distant galaxies, replacing the steady comfort of dawn. And yet, there's beauty here. With no atmosphere to block your view, the Milky Way stretches across the sky in dazzling clarity. Rivers of stars, clouds of dust glowing faintly, entire nebulae showing their colours as if painted just for you. For the first time, humanity sees the universe raw and unfiltered. It's stunning, breathtaking, if only you could still breathe. Your lungs are burning now. Oxygen is vanishing faster than you can inhale. You remember to grab one of those floating pickle jar lids, silly, yes. But you imagine holding it like a makeshift helmet. If nothing else, it distracts you from the truth. Earth is becoming unlivable. But let's not sink too deep into panic. After all, this is a bedtime journey, not a nightmare. So here's a thought to soothe you. Maybe, just maybe, drifting Earth will cross paths with another star system. There's a non-zero chance, though astronomically slim, that you could find a new sun, a new orbit, a new home. In the timescales of billions of years, rogue planets do sometimes find themselves captured by wandering stars. So, as your planet sails silently into the void, you let yourself pretend that somewhere out there is a gentle yellow sun waiting to adopt you. You, your cat, your floating fridge of pickles, all welcomed by a new gravitational embrace. But for now, the only truth is this: gravity has abandoned the Sunday, and in doing so, it has abandoned you. You notice something missing. Not the sun this time, you've already said your goodbyes there. No, it's subtler, quieter, yet somehow more personal. You look up, or is it down? Orientation has lost all meaning, and realize the moon is no longer where it should be. It's drifting. Without gravity, Earth cannot cradle its companion anymore. The moon, usually loyal and predictable, has been cut loose. No more gentle pull-shaping tides. No more synchronized orbit painting silver arcs across the night. The bond that lasted over 4 billion years is broken in an instant. Here's your mainstream fact to steady you. The moon orbits Earth because gravity balances its inertia. Left unchecked, it would fly straight into space. Tonight, unchecked, is exactly what happens. The moon continues along a line tangential to where its orbit used to be, speeding silently into the dark, like a marble slipping from the edge of a spinning plate. And with it, an entire rhythm vanishes. The tides, the twice-daily heartbeat of Earth's oceans stop. No more rolling surf, no gentle tug pulling the seas. For coastal towns, this means immediate chaos. Water that was moments ago rushing out simply freezes mid-gesture, confused, lost. The oceans still slosh, of course, but without the moon's command, they become restless, unpredictable, violent in strange ways. Here's the quirky tidbit of the evening. With the moon gone, Earth's nights are darker than at any time in human memory. Generations of poets who once whispered under moonlight, generations of lovers who confessed beneath silver beams all robbed. You're staring at a night that feels emptier than silence, a sky where the stars seem almost too sharp without that soft lunar glow to anchor them. Scientists still argue whether life on Earth ever would have evolved as it did without the moon. Its stabilizing tug on our planet's tilt gave us regular seasons, gentle climate patterns, a predictable balance between chaos and order. Now, without that guiding hand, Earth's axis begins to wobble. Slowly at first, imperceptibly, but with centuries or perhaps even just decades, our seasons could twist into extremes. Snow in July, blistering sun in December, hurricanes birthed from the tilt itself. As you drift through these thoughts, you imagine following the moon on its solo journey. It's shrinking from sight now, just a pale coin tumbling end over end into the dark. Without Earth's pull, it's no longer tidally locked, no longer showing one familiar face. Instead, it spins freely, showing sides humanity has never seen. It's shy no longer, its hidden hemisphere revealed too late for anyone to notice. You picture ancient astronomers, those who once worshipped the moon, staring up in horror at its vanishing act. The tides they used to predict, the calendars they carved into stone, the rituals and myths all undone in a single cosmic shrug. The moon isn't betraying us. It simply doesn't have a choice. Gravity has left the chat. Meanwhile, life below is panicking. Animals that relied on lunar cycles, sea turtles, spawning fish, even certain insects lose their compass. Nighttime predators stumble in confusion. Wolves howl at nothing, their songs dissolving into silence. Even your cat, still drifting beside you, stares wide-eyed at the sky, trying to find the glowing disk it once chased in play. And then comes the realization that makes you shiver. The moon was also our shield. Its gravity swept up countless asteroids, cosmic debris that might otherwise have struck Earth. With it gone, the planet is naked, vulnerable, exposed to wandering rocks with no celestial body to take the hits. But here's the strangest, most oddly comforting thought. The moon's journey is not an ending, it's a story in progress. Somewhere out there, perhaps millions of years from now, it might be captured by another planet. Imagine some alien civilization one day, looking up at their sky, marveling at a pale orb, never knowing it once belonged to Earth, your moon, their new companion. So you let yourself watch it drift away, not with fear, but with quiet awe. After all, the moon has always been humanity's mirror. It shaped our stories, our songs, our very sense of romance and mystery. And now it teaches us one last thing. Nothing, not even the most faithful companion, lasts forever. As the moon shrinks into distance, Earth feels lonelier, smaller, and yet, curiously, you feel a spark of wonder. If gravity can stop, if moons can drift, then perhaps anything, absolutely anything, is possible. You turn your gaze downward, toward the blue marble that was once so familiar. Something feels wrong, eerily wrong. The oceans, those vast shimmering lungs of Earth, aren't moving the way you remember. They seem sluggish, hesitant, almost as if the whole planet has forgotten how to breathe. Without gravity, water loses its anchor. It doesn't cling obediently to the seafloor anymore. Instead it drifts, bulges, lifts itself skyward in patches like great shimmering globes of liquid. It's not that the oceans are leaving instantly. A momentum holds them close for a moment, the way a passenger hesitates in their seat when a bus screeches to a halt. But hesitation doesn't last forever. And soon, the seas begin to rise in slow, ghostly curtains. Mainstream fact, delivered gently. Gravity is what keeps water pressed to Earth's surface. Even tides are a balancing act between Earth's pull and the moon's tug. Remove gravity, and the oceans no longer know their place. They begin to wander upward, turning the very idea of sea level into a meaningless joke. You watch the first strange bubbles lift off the surface. Picture raindrops but inverted, immense, hundreds of miles wide. They float into the atmosphere like balloons, distorting the sky with their refracted light. Sunlight scatters through these drifting spheres, painting rainbows that would put any prism to shame. For a moment, it's beautiful, a surreal carnival of liquid gems orbiting above the land. But here's your quirky tidbit. Fish, confused beyond measure, are carried upward with these new water globes. Imagine schools of tuna, entire shoals of sardines, all suddenly weightless, flopping in disoriented spirals as their ocean turns inside out. Dolphins leap straight into the sky. Jellyfish pulse awkwardly, suspended in massive aquatic orbs that drift higher and higher. Somewhere out there, a very lucky seagull has just grabbed sushi in midair without diving at all. Scientists still argue whether life could survive even a few minutes without gravity binding the oceans. Some suggest water would simply evaporate into a mist, dispersing into space. Others argue momentum would hold massive chunks together longer, letting strange floating seas orbit Earth before drifting off entirely. You, drifting alongside it all, realize the truth is both horrifying and mesmerizing. Now imagine the human perspective. Coastal cities, New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, watch in horror as the ocean simply unmoors itself. Skyscrapers are left towering above empty seabeds, while submarines float skyward like toys set free from a bathtub. Fishing boats, once bobbing gently, now rise in eerie silence, their captains gripping rails that no longer matter. You drift lower and past what was once the Pacific. The basin is exposed, a yawning scar stretching wider than your imagination. Mountain ranges hidden beneath water reveal themselves, jagged and sharp. Creatures from the abyss, anglerfish, squid the size of buses, find themselves staring into sunlight for the very first time. They don't look happy about it. And yet, there's a fragile beauty in this apocalypse. With oceans lifting away, land masses gleam like never before. Coral reefs, usually hidden, are suddenly radiant gardens exposed to daylight. The Great Barrier Reef shines in colours no tourist has ever seen. Fossils long buried beneath waves wink at you from the mud. Still, life without oceans is short-lived. No seas mean no circulation of heat across the planet. Normally, currents like the Gulf Stream carry warmth, balancing climates. Without them, deserts freeze and polar regions burn. Within weeks, Earth's weather spirals into chaos. Storms with no precedent, droughts where rain once danced, monsoons turning into endless floods that never return to the sea. You can't help but laugh a soft, bitter chuckle when you realize surfers everywhere just lost their waves. Hang 10, you whisper, if you can find a beach that isn't levitating. Then comes the smell. Without oceans, vast stretches of seafloor begin to rot. Algae, plankton, and centuries of organic matter are exposed to air. The planet exhales a stench of decay so strong it seems to curl even the stars. Whole ecosystems collapse in hours. And you, floating serenely, are reminded how fragile Earth always was, how dependent it was on a single invisible force. Yet here's the twist. Water is stubborn. It doesn't want to leave entirely. Large chunks remain clumped together in orbit, forming makeshift moons of liquid. Earth gains companions, watery ghosts circling above. They glimmer in sunlight like crystal chandeliers. For a brief, almost poetic moment, Earth is not blue but jeweled, circled by halos of drifting seas. And you realize aliens passing by might never know Earth was once a water world. To them, it looks like a shattered gem, its essence torn away, floating around like decorative ornaments. The oceans have become souvenirs of a planet unraveling. The last breath of Earth's oceans isn't a single sigh. It's a scattering, a dissolving chorus of liquid voices, each drop whispering goodbye as it drifts into the void. You lift your eyes from the vanishing seas to the sky, and for the first time in your life, you notice that air has weight, or rather, that it used to. Without gravity's steady hand pressing the atmosphere against the planet, Earth's protective blanket begins to unravel like smoke caught in a breeze. At first, it isn't obvious. You inhale and exhale, still surrounded by oxygen and nitrogen, still cushioned by the familiar soft pressure against your chest. But then, slowly, imperceptibly, the air begins to drift upward, peeling away in delicate layers. It's as if Earth is sighing, releasing its final breath into the void. A mainstream fact: gravity is what keeps our atmosphere clinging to Earth. Without it, molecules scatter into space, slipping free like marbles rolling off a tilted table. Over time, not only oxygen but every trace of breathable air would vanish, leaving Earth as naked as the moon. You glance sideways and catch something astonishing: clouds untethered. They don't glide gently across the sky anymore. Instead, they stretch upward like ghostly curtains, pulling themselves into ribbons that climb higher and higher until they shred and dissolve into nothing. Thunderstorms die mid-strike. Lightning bolts stutter into silence. Even rain forgets how to fall, droplets drifting lazily in all directions before fading away. And here's your quirky tidbit. Imagine helium balloons, usually symbols of levity and celebration. Now, without gravity, balloons have no reason to rise because everything is already rising. In a sense, you are the balloon, drifting along with molecules that once knew their place. Somewhere out there, birthday parties are ruined in the most spectacular way possible. Scientists still argue whether air would dissipate instantly or linger for hours, perhaps days, depending on Earth's rotation and solar winds. Some suggest the upper atmosphere would peel away first, creating shimmering auroras that stretch into interplanetary space auroras so vast they'd put entire galaxies to shame. Others argue that volcanic gases, still spewing from the crust, might create strange fleeting pockets of air long after the rest has fled. From the ground, the human experience is surreal. People look up and realize stars are suddenly sharper, brighter, crueler. The sky, no longer softened by a veil of air, turns pitch black even at noon. The sun burns raw and unfiltered, its light too sharp for eyes, its radiation too harsh for skin. You can almost hear sunscreen companies weeping in unison. And yet, before panic fully sets in, there's a moment of awe. With no atmosphere to scatter light, sunsets vanish, but in their place the horizon glows with a perfect edge. The curvature of Earth is visible from everywhere, a permanent cosmic panorama. Every stargazer's dream has come true, just in the most inconvenient apocalypse imaginable. Breathing, though, becomes a problem. At first you gasp and fill your lungs easily enough, but as the atmosphere thins, every inhale feels like sipping through a straw that's slowly being pulled away. Pilots once trained for this hypoxia, the slow starvation of oxygen, but no training prepares you for an entire planet unbreathing. And there's sound, or rather, the absence of it. With air fleeing, Earth's soundtrack begins to die. No wind, no rustle of leaves, no rolling thunder. Even conversations fade, voices swallowed in silence. A concert in this world is nothing more than a pantomime. The only orchestra left is in your mind. You drift lower, closer to Earth's surface, and watch as fires sputter out. Without oxygen, flames starve, leaving behind blackened forests and abandoned cities. Campfires, once symbols of human warmth, are now just piles of cold ash. The only light left comes from stars above and the unrelenting Sunday. Still, nature finds a way to surprise you. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents, those strange chimneys of heat, continue to belch gases. For a brief fleeting period, bubbles rise and form small domes of breathable pockets. It's almost comical, little oxygen balloons dotting the dead ocean floor like cosmic party favors. Perhaps some lucky creature stumbles into one and breathes a little longer than the rest. And here's a strange consolation. With no atmosphere, meteors stop burning up. Every shooting star once admired now slams into Earth unfiltered. Rocks, pebbles, cosmic dust, everything falls unchecked. Ironically, you now have too many shooting stars to wish upon, though wishes don't travel far without air to carry them. You realize how tied you were to something invisible. We always praised the stars, the mountains, the seas. Yet what sustained us was the unseen cushion we barely noticed. The air between heartbeats, the pressure in each lungful, the invisible thread keeping warmth close and radiation away. Now, that thread unravels. And here's your quiet, bittersweet laugh. Somewhere, a saxophonist takes a deep breath to play the final note of jazz. Nothing comes out. Silence. The universe has just killed jazz. Truly a tragedy. The atmosphere's last breath drifts upward, glowing faintly as solar wind tugs it away, scattering it like glitter across the cosmos. And you, floating alongside, realize Earth is becoming more alien with every passing moment. The planet you knew is gone. What remains is raw, naked rock stripped of air, sea, and song. You hover close to Earth's surface now, and the silence has weight. Not the comforting weight of air pressing against your skin, but the heavy hush of absence, the kind of silence that seeps into every corner and refuses to leave. The atmosphere is gone, the seas have unraveled, and now the true cost arrives, the collapse of life. At first it's confusing because not everything dies at once. Grass still leans green on hillsides, cats still prowl alleys, and trees still stretch their branches toward the Sunday. But the illusion doesn't last. Life, after all, is built on gravity's quiet promise that there will be air to breathe, water to drink, and soil to anchor roots. Without that promise, biology unravels. A mainstream fact, plants need gravity not only to hold soil and water, but also to direct growth. Gravity tells a root to grow downward and a stem to grow upward. Remove that signal, and roots wander aimlessly while leaves twist in confusion. Photosynthesis might continue for hours or days, but soon chaos replaces order. You glance at a forest. Leaves droop and spin upward, twisting like lost paper scraps. Roots creep out of the soil, as if searching for something familiar and no longer finding it. Without gravity's gentle tug, every tree is directionless, and then, without air, they can no longer photosynthesize. The forest goes still, not in rest but in suffocation. Here's your quirky tidbit. In microgravity experiments aboard the International Space Station, spiders have been given the chance to spin webs. Deprived of gravity, their webs become lopsided, disorganized, oddly abstract, as though Picasso himself had taken over as arachnid architect. Now imagine every spider on Earth suddenly weaving their final surrealist tapestries across abandoned gardens. For a brief, strange moment, Earth becomes a gallery of gravity-free art. But then comes the real unraveling. Insects, those small engineers of ecosystems, collapse next. Without atmosphere, bees cannot fly. The lift of wings depends on the push and pull of air. Birds, too, flap uselessly, their wings carving through nothing. You imagine a sky filled with creatures paddling in silence, before they drift downward in confusion and finally stillness. Scientists still argue whether certain extremophiles organisms adapted to deep ocean vents or underground caverns could cling to existence a little longer. Some bacteria might survive in sealed rock pores, perhaps even thrive in odd chemical niches. But for complex life, the debate ends quickly. Without air pressure, without water, without stability, multicellular life collapses like a house of cards in a storm. You float through a city now, and it's eerie. Streets once full of chatter are frozen. Automobiles, once bound to roads, drift upward in ungainly ballet. Coffee cups, pens, half-read books all hover in suspension, artifacts of a life interrupted. But more haunting than the objects is the absence of people. Humanity, built on breath, is folding in on itself. There's something darkly comic in the details, though. Gym treadmills designed to fight gravity now look absurd machines to run nowhere in a world where everyone floats freely. Amusement park rides, once thrilling for their flirtation with weightlessness, are now permanently weightless, every seat suspended mid-scream. Somewhere, a roller coaster train hangs motionless at the top of its loop, passengers still buckled in for eternity. As you drift further, you notice animals adapting in their final minutes. Fish, freed from sinking or floating, spiral in wild, chaotic patterns no longer able to orient. Dogs leap joyfully, only to find themselves never landing, legs flailing in confusion. Cats, of course, adapt better. They always land on their feet, except now there is no landing, only infinite turning. Even in apocalypse, cats are smug. But it isn't just the living that collapse. Ecosystems crumble in domino fashion. Pollination ends with bees, seed dispersal ends with wind, soil cycles end with worms and microbes dying off. With no atmosphere, decay slows, so forests remain frozen in eerie stasis, like statues carved by disaster. The collapse of life is not loud, but quiet, drawn out, strangely graceful, like a candle guttering rather than exploding. You might ask, could humanity survive with technology? For a brief while, maybe. Underground bunkers could recycle oxygen, hydroponics could grow food, and humans are clever at patching holes in nature's fabric. But in a world without gravity, even bunkers become questionable. Air doesn't settle inside a chamber. It disperses evenly into space unless perfectly sealed. And carrying water? Without weight, reservoirs scatter, droplets clinging to walls like lost pearls. Scientists still argue whether humanity could engineer a new stability. Could artificial gravity centrifuges, rotating habitats, save a fragment of civilization? Theoretically, yes. But globally, instantly, impossible. When gravity fails, adaptation needs to be immediate, and evolution never prepares for instant apocalypse. And so, the collapse of life is not just the collapse of individuals, but of stories. The story of a child running across a playground. The story of a family dinner with the smell of bread rising. The story of billions of heartbeats, synchronized by air and water and Earth's pull, all stories ending together in a silence deeper than the vacuum above. Yet even in collapse, you feel awe, because in this silence, you witness Earth returning to a kind of cosmic stillness. No rustle, no roar, no breath. Only the raw hum of radiation from the sun and the faint echoes of the universe beyond. It's not the end of everything, but it is the end of everything we knew. and you can't help but smirk. Somewhere, cockroaches might still be scuttling along, smug as ever, proving every apocalypse cliché correct. If life finds a way, it will probably wear a tiny pair of antennae and an unbothered expression. You drift toward the coast now, to the places where water once rolled in endless rhythm, where tides kept time better than any clock humanity ever made. But without gravity, oceans do not stay loyal to their beds. They unravel, not in waves, but in billows of drifting blue, a liquid tapestry torn apart and sent wandering into the sky. The first thing you notice is how quiet it becomes. Waves, normally the ocean's heartbeat, vanish. There's no crash against the shore, no sigh of surf. Instead, water hovers, hanging like a giant quilt of liquid glass. Pools rise into the air, twisting into blobs of shimmering blue. Some cling to one another, merging and splitting like living creatures. Others float off into the void, turning seas into scattered pearls drifting upward toward space. Here's the fact. Gravity is what holds water to Earth. The moon pulls at oceans and creates tides. Without gravity, both Earth's grip and the moon's influence vanish. Seas lose their rhythm, their boundaries, their patience. They no longer know where to go, so they go everywhere. You look down at the former shoreline, and it's eerie. Beaches stretch out like scars, damp but drying fast. Sand, once reshaped daily by the push and pull of tides, lies frozen, unchanged. Ships tilt awkwardly, their hulls lifted by nothing, their anchors now meaningless. Coral reefs, once hidden beneath waves, are exposed, sizzling under a sun with no shield of ocean water. Quirky tidbit. On the International Space Station, astronauts sometimes release a single bead of water. It floats in a perfect sphere, glimmering like a jewel, sometimes merging with other beads. Now imagine that, but scaled to the size of Earth's oceans. Billions of gallons of water breaking into droplets, bouncing, colliding, merging again in a slow, surreal dance above the planet. It's beautiful, in a devastating way. Fish are trapped in this strange new existence. Freed from their oceans, they hover in globes of water, suspended mid-air. Some still swim, circling inside their shrinking liquid prisons. Others drift helplessly as their watery bubbles evaporate into space. For a brief, tragic moment, Earth becomes a planet of floating aquariums, a silent zoo of doomed creatures. Scientists still argue whether deep-sea creatures, those that rely on pressure as much as water, would survive longer, perhaps for a few minutes, maybe hours, in sealed water blobs. But inevitably, even these refuges burst or disperse. The deep becomes shallow, the shallow becomes scattered, and eventually, all becomes empty. You drift over what was once the Pacific Ocean. Instead of a vast expanse of blue, you find only a fractured mosaic of spheres, some miles wide, others no larger than a droplet. Sunlight refracts through them, scattering rainbows across the sky. The planet has turned into a prism, a dazzling but silent spectacle. It's almost comical. The most beautiful water show in history happens when no one is left to applaud, and the consequences ripple outward. Rivers no longer flow, they stretch into the air like silver ribbons. Lakes hover like overturned bowls, their surfaces bulging and drifting upward. Waterfalls, those dramatic reminders of gravity's power, hang still in mid-air, their torrents frozen in place. You could reach out and touch Niagara Falls and find it waiting, suspended like glass sculpture. Cities crumble faster now. Without water pressure, pipes explode, reservoirs burst, and entire plumbing systems turn into chaotic clouds of droplets. Firefighting becomes impossible. Crops wither without irrigation. Even the simplest routines, drinking, bathing, cooking, become cosmic challenges. Humanity, if any clusters remain, must chase floating bubbles of water just to survive another day. There's humour in the absurdity, if you squint. Picture someone chasing after a bubble of soup in their kitchen, spoon outstretched, trying not to let carrots and noodles escape into the air. Imagine coffee shops offering bubble lattes, served in floating orbs you have to slurp mid-air. Survival would become slapstick, except the laugh track is missing, replaced by silence. But the scale of collapse is bigger than comedy. Ecosystems unravel further without oceans to regulate temperature. Normally, seas absorb heat by day and release it slowly by night. Without them, The planet swings between extremes, scorching under the sun, freezing in shadow. Deserts expand, ice caps crumble, not into seas but into more drifting spheres of frozen water, fragile and doomed. You drift upward now, through layers of hovering water. Sunlight turns them into stained glass, filtering into shades of blue, green and violet. For a moment, it feels like swimming in the sky, except there's no up, no down, no breath, only suspension. You reach for a droplet, and it trembles against your hand before breaking into smaller pearls. Oceans have become dust, shattered like glass into liquid confetti. And yet, life lingers in memories. Children once built sandcastles on beaches that no longer exist. Sailors once charted waves that are now sculptures in the sky. Poets once wrote of tides as metaphors for love and loss, but now there are no tides, only drift. The romance of the sea has collapsed, leaving only its reflection, fragmented and scattered across the heavens. Scientists still argue what would happen to Earth's crust once oceans lift away. Normally, the weight of water presses down on tectonic plates, stabilizing them. Remove that weight, and the crust could rebound violently. Volcanoes might erupt, earthquakes might surge, continents might crack. Gravity wasn't just a sculptor of seas, but a restraining hand on fire beneath. Without it, Earth trembles more, not less. So oceans adrift are not just water adrift, but the loss of rhythm, of stability, of life's foundation. It is Earth without breath, without song, without pulse. It is beauty and horror blended, a planet becoming art at the cost of existence. You can't help but smirk again, dark humour intact. Somewhere, dolphins are probably enjoying the chaos, leaping joyfully into free-floating globes of water, turning apocalypse into play. Trust dolphins to treat the end of the world as one last game. You drift now toward the places humanity called home cities, that once bustled with gravity's assurance, with feet planted firmly on sidewalks, with buildings leaning confidently into the ground. But without gravity, cities unbind. Streets no longer stay flat, towers no longer know which way is down, and everything built on Earth's promise of weight begins to drift like dust shaken loose from a shelf. At first, the view is surreal rather than terrifying. Skyscrapers tilt, their glass faces reflecting fragments of floating oceans above. Bridges no longer press down onto their supports, arch upward like stretched ribbons, snapping free in slow motion. Cars slide gently from roads, their tires spinning pointlessly, rising into the air like metallic balloons. The world's most stubborn traffic jams dissolve not with relief, but with surrender. Here's the fact. Cities are designed with one assumption that gravity never changes. Foundations hold only because weight pushes them down. Without that pressure, steel rods and concrete blocks don't fail immediately, but they lose the meaning of balance. Floors no longer stay beneath feet, chairs float beside tables. Books drift from shelves, their pages fanning like wings. A library becomes a galaxy of words. The quirky tidbit comes from space stations again. Astronauts tether pens, food packets, even themselves, because the tiniest motion can send an object drifting endlessly. Now scale that to an entire metropolis. Imagine Manhattan without anchors, taxicabs floating through Times Square, hot dog stands bobbing into the air, neon signs detaching and drifting into the dark. Cities become parades without floats, carnivals without music, silent spectacles where nothing stays put. Scientists still argue whether the atmosphere itself could hold long enough to keep floating debris nearby. Some think air resistance might slow the upward drift, creating layers of suspended objects, cars hovering just above buildings, rooftops floating above cars, a pancake stack of disarray. Others suggest everything would eventually disperse into orbit, turning cities into cosmic junkyards. Either way, the skyline you once recognized dissolves into chaos. You pass through what used to be a kitchen window. Inside, the scene is almost comedic. Plates drift like UFOs, pots hover beside stoves, their contents scattering into tiny edible constellations. A cat, bewildered but still regal, paws at a floating fish that escaped a shattered bowl. Somewhere, a coffee mug bobs slowly, still steaming, absurdly determined to be ordinary in a world that no longer is. The absurdity expands on a massive scale. Imagine stadiums, whole crowds, seats and all, drifting upward mid-game. Basketball hoops detach and rise with the players still reaching for them. Musicians in concert halls float off stages, their instruments scattering into surreal orchestras. Imagine the Eiffel Tower tilting away from Paris, or the Statue of Liberty drifting solemnly across the Hudson like a goddess abandoning her post. But beauty lingers in the collapse. Without gravity, cities become sculptures, kinetic art pieces suspended mid-air. The Colosseum unravels stone by stone into orbiting arcs. The pyramids, once monuments to eternity, lift grain by grain into drifting dust, forming halos around Cairo. Lights continue to glow for a while, powered by batteries and inertia, until darkness finally claims them. It is as if the world's art and architecture has been offered to the sky as a gift. Yet survival shrinks again. People, untethered, must adapt to vertical freedom. Handrails become lifelines. Belts, ropes, and straps, ordinary things, become tools of survival. You picture a grandmother tying herself to her armchair with bedsheets, insisting she'll finish her knitting even as yarn drifts in lazy spirals. Children might laugh at first, turning hallways into playgrounds. But laughter fades quickly when kitchens and hospitals no longer function, when medicine floats out of reach, when fire becomes an untamable cloud of sparks. Remember earlier when oceans left? Cities depended on them. No water, no survival. Now add infrastructure collapse. No gravity, no food production, no transportation. Subways don't run when trains float. Airplanes don't fly when lift has no meaning. Even bicycles become impossible when wheels refuse to grip. You are reduced to grabbing, holding, and drifting. Movement itself is redefined. Humour persists in the imagination, though. You picture world leaders floating at a summit, microphones bobbing between them, each trying to look serious while chasing a runaway pen. Imagine a mayor giving a speech while tied to City Hall with an extension cord. History, rewritten as slapstick. Yet the truth beneath is sobering. Power structures collapse as quickly as buildings. Order drifts away with brick and steel. Scientists still argue how fast cities would disintegrate. Would concrete crumble instantly, or would steel frameworks drift intact for weeks? Some say iconic landmarks might survive longer, clinging to cohesion. Others believe the very molecules of structures without the gentle compression of gravity would loosen, turning buildings into powder. Either way, permanence proves fragile. The word skyscraper becomes ironic when sky itself refuses to stay put. As you float among the ruins, you realize something. Humanity's greatest works were always temporary, even with gravity. Time wore them down. Weather reshaped them. But without gravity, the illusion of permanence shatters in hours, not centuries. You see in real time what archaeologists usually see in fragments, the unraveling of civilizations, sped up like a cruel time-lapse. And so cities unbound become memorials, not to gravity's absence, but to its gift. Gravity gave order, boundaries, rhythm, possibility. Without it, life becomes art for a moment, then emptiness forever. Still, you smirk. Somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten apartment, a gamer clings to their console, insisting on finishing one last level while floating through their living room. Humans, even in apocalypse, cling to routine. There's comfort in pretending the end of gravity is just another glitch. You look up, or what used to be up, and realize the sky itself is no longer holding. Without gravity, the dome of blue that once felt so permanent dissolves into something stranger, more fragile, more terrifyingly beautiful. The sky was never really a ceiling at all. It was an ocean of air held close by Earth's pull. Now that pull is gone, and the ocean begins to leak. At first, it feels subtle, like a gentle wind you can't place. Clouds lose their weight and begin to drift upward, spreading into vast, thin veils. The familiar shapes, puffballs and streaks stretch endlessly, unraveling like pulled cotton. You can almost hear them sighing as they loosen, as though the sky itself has been waiting centuries to exhale. The mainstream fact here is unavoidable. Earth's atmosphere is bound by gravity. Without it, molecules scatter. Within minutes, the highest layers begin to peel away. Within hours, oxygen thins. Within days, the sky becomes transparent, a blackness revealing stars even at noon. You imagine lying on what used to be a grassy field, staring upward not at sky but at infinity. The quirky tidbit is how sound itself begins to die. With atmosphere thinning, noise loses its medium. Birds flap but you hear no wings. Children scream but the sound cuts short, swallowed by thinning air. A guitar strummed in a floating room hums only faintly, like a memory of music. Conversations become whispers pressed ear to ear, until even whispers vanish. The world grows silent, as though wrapped in velvet. Scientists still argue whether fragments of atmosphere might linger in uneven patches, or pockets of breathable air drifting like invisible balloons. Perhaps survivors could stumble upon bubbles of oxygen, inhaling like fish gasping at the surface of a shrinking pond. Others argue the dissipation would be swift and uniform, leaving no such mercy. Either way, the sky as you knew it dissolves. You picture cities again, their lights flickering into the open dark. Without air to scatter sunlight, the earth becomes a planet of stark contrasts, harsh brightness and pitch black. Shadows cut sharp lines, unforgiving. Nights are so absolute they swallow sight. Days are so blinding they burn without warmth. The soft gradients of dawn and dusk vanish forever. No more sunsets. No more pastel skies. Just a binary world of light and nothing. You drift through what used to be a forest canopy. Leaves detach and rise, chasing air molecules upward. The forest unravels into a green nebula. Somewhere, a swing creaks for the last time before chains lift free of their frame. Playground laughter falls silent as children float higher, their voices lost in thinning breath. It is heartbreaking, and yet, in the quiet, achingly serene. Humour, though, still lingers in your wandering imagination. You picture weather reporters struggling to explain the end of meteorology. Tonight's forecast calls for no clouds, no rain, and permanent cosmic exposure. You imagine someone selling bottled air, chasing customers through drifting streets, insisting, "Buy one, get one free while supplies last," which is about 5 minutes. Absurdity remains a coping mechanism, even as breath itself becomes currency. And then you realize, without air, fire dies. Flames that once warmed, cooked, or destroyed flicker out instantly. No campfires, no stoves, no wildfires, just cold, unbroken darkness. Perhaps humanity should have feared that silence more than anything. But beauty again threads through the collapse. With no air to scatter starlight, the universe pours itself naked into your eyes. The Milky Way is no longer a faint smear, but a blazing river of light. Planets shine like gems. Nebulae reveal colours that air once muted. The cosmos itself leans closer, like a curtain drawn back on a secret stage. It is devastatingly clear and impossibly vast. And yet, the absence of sky is more than visual, it is existential. Without atmosphere, Earth is no longer Earth. Oceans gone, cities unbound, people scattered now, even the sky betrays you. The final boundary between home and universe dissolves, and you are left unprotected in the vacuum. Scientists still argue whether life could adapt. Some suggest sealed domes could preserve pockets of atmosphere. Others argue technology might synthesize artificial gravity fields, anchoring air like invisible cages. But these are theories for survivors, not realities for the billions lost in the first days. In truth, without gravity, there is no long-term home here. Earth becomes a rock among rocks, stripped of its crown. And yet, as you drift, a thought comforts you. Perhaps the sky was never meant to be permanent. Perhaps it was always a temporary veil, a blue illusion lasting just long enough for humanity to wonder about what lay beyond. Now, with the veil lifted, the universe offers itself fully. It is terrifying, yes, but it is also intimate. For the first time, nothing stands between you and the stars. You exhale what little air remains and watch the breath rise upward, joining the last fragments of sky. The final curtain lifts. The stage is infinite. And so, dear traveller, we arrive at the quiet end of our journey through a world where gravity no longer holds. You've drifted with oceans as they lifted, with mountains as they crumbled, with cities unravelling into the airless dark. You've watched the sky itself dissolve, revealing the stars in their raw brilliance. And through it all, you've floated weightless, untethered, listening to the silence. Now, let the tension ease from your shoulders. You don't need to carry the weight of collapsing worlds. The what-if has played itself out, and here, in this moment, everything is steady. Gravity still holds you, still wraps the air around you, still anchors your bed beneath your body. You can breathe deeply, softly, without worry. Imagine the world right now as it truly is, a planet turning silently in the dark, its oceans staying where they belong, its sky stretching blue or star-filled above you. Billions of people moving, breathing, living, each of them held close by the same gentle pull that cradles you now. Gravity, invisible yet faithful, whispering its constant lullaby. The sharp edges of imagination fade into softer colors now. Instead of collapsing skylines, picture a single candle flickering calmly on a nightstand. Instead of drifting continents, imagine the quiet rise and fall of your own chest. Instead of silence in vacuum, hear the steady rhythm of your breath, the faint sounds of your room, the subtle hum of life continuing exactly as it should. Scientists may still debate the mysteries of gravity, may chase equations and paradoxes, but for you tonight, none of that is required. You don't need to solve the universe. You only need to rest within it. So let go of the swirling images, the falling worlds, the soaring stars. Let them dissolve like dreams on the edge of sleep. In their place, welcome the calm that comes when imagination has run its course. You are safe. You are held. You are here. Let your thoughts stretch out one last time, like a body reaching toward the stars, then gently fold back into stillness. The story has carried you far enough. The journey is complete. And as you close your eyes, know this. The universe continues, its quiet dance above you, steady and vast, but you have permission to sleep. Sweet dreams, traveler. May your night be restful, may your mind be light, and may gravity hold you gently until morning.